The Mandalorian is back, and this week's episode appears to have been the return of the king. And by king, we of course mean Boba Fett. The greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy has come back to remind everyone who the OG Mandalorian was, and we're sure you all absolutely loved to see him kick some Imperial tail, as we certainly did. But Boba Fett's grand return showed a new side of the man that, for some, might have been unexpected. Where others might have just tried to kill Din Djarin and steal their armor back, Boba instead tried to reason with him and later offered to help Din reclaim Grogu from the Empire, apparently without even asking for a reward. For a bounty hunter that was known for his extremely high price, this would seem to have been a major change in character, but it wasn't. Boba Fett has always been an honorable man behind his cold veneer, and in this video, we're going to be talking about his moral codes.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
On Tython, Boba proved himself to be kinder and more charitable than his appearances in the movies would have led casual viewers to expect. At the start of the episode, he essentially had Din at his mercy. There was no way our titular Mandalorian could have gotten away from Fett in that scenario, and yet, even when Din rejected his extremely reasonable offer at first, Fett didn't just kill him and take the gear. He only went to steal it when Sith hit the fan, taking it shortly before the real tragedy of this episode, the death of the Razor Crest, occurred. Even after all that, he offered to help Din get Grogu free of charge, even though he wasn't asked to. So, what gives? Simply put, Boba Fett was a man of honor, and he always has been. This doesn't necessarily make him a good guy. There was a lot of messed up stuff that he did and was willing to do, and more often than not, sided against more moral characters, especially during the time of the Empire. But he still had honor and a moral code after his own fashion. This concept isn't anything new in Star Wars. Canderous Ordo fit the same archetype, for example. But what were Fett's moral codes exactly? Well, let's start with what he was taught. A lot of Boba's personality and character traits were imparted to him by his father, Jango. Jango Fett, as we all know, died when Boba was still young, but he still had a massive impact on Boba's worldview and path in life. It was because of Jango that Boba chose to be a bounty hunter after all. There were differences between the two men, of course, despite there being clones. Boba didn't care much about Mandalorian tradition and he largely preferred clever tactics over combat skill, but his values were still based on his father's. After closely studying Jango, a Kaminoan cloner once made the following observation. He is a killer many times over, ending the life of others without hesitation if paid to do so, yet his anger was obvious when I suggested he lacked morality. Jango may not have been moral according to common perceptions of morality, but he did hold a unique system of morality that he taught Boba. This was part of his bounty hunter code, a set of guidelines for living the life of a bounty hunter that he came up with. Many of those guidelines were strictly practical, but many had curious moral implications, and Fett considered it a code of honor. Among the things he taught Boba were to always be polite to clients and to enemies in particular, to never complain and say no more than necessary, to face one's fears, and to die with valor. Most importantly, Fett believed that he who hires my hand, hires my whole self, which is to say that bounty hunters should dedicate themselves to their clients fully. Boba lived strictly by these honor codes. He never took a single job that he found morally distasteful, as his reputation was such that he could afford to be picky about his contracts. Of course, there were a number of things we'd find distasteful that Fett simply didn't. He was fine with working for the Empire, and he obviously had no qualms about killing, as Jango had taught him that death was important to life. Unlike other bounty hunters, however, Fett refused to take on jobs that he saw as preying on the weak. Rather, he only went after targets that he believed deserved to be hunted. Even then, Fett granted his targets a modicum of respect, something quite rare among bounty hunters. He never tortured his prisoners unless he had been hired to acquire information and he deemed it absolutely necessary. By and large, he preferred to grant his targets a quick, clean death, and again, he only killed those he believed deserved it. He was famous for frequently using a disruptor pistol to disintegrate targets, a weapon that he considered to be more merciful than blasters, which could leave bitterly painful wounds instead of killing. It should be noted that it's quite possible that he took this extra care to make sure targets didn't suffer because of what had happened to his father. Mace Windu's lightsaber had cauterized Jango's head, and as Boba later learned, the elder Fett would have been conscious on some level for about 15 minutes afterwards. Per his father's code, Boba was quite dedicated to whoever hired him, as we stated before. When he made a contract, he understood it as putting all of his capabilities at that being's disposal. He would often help his clients in ways they didn't ask for, finding problems that his clients hadn't picked up on and solving them. There were limits to this, of course, as generally Boba only helped his clients if it would have some impact on what he was hired to do. But it was nonetheless something that made him unique among bounty hunters. We got a glimpse of this honor code in The Mandalorian when he offered to ally with Din to rescue Grogu. It may have seemed to Din and to us that he was just giving Din a freebie for whatever reason, but in reality, he would have seen it as making his whole self available to the client. Din had paid him back by giving his armor, and so he resolved to solve Din's problem for him. It's also worth noting that Boba developed moral codes of his own, which were unrelated to those taught by his father. Jango Fett was a bit of an antisocial character. He only really developed close relationships with a handful of people, and he had warned his son to avoid personal attachments, as he believed they only ever brought pain. But Boba took this a lot further. His father's death and his experiences in the Clone Wars made him even more distrusting of other people than Jango had been, and he became even more antisocial, especially after a particularly bad experience shortly after the war's end. Around 16 BBY, Boba attempted to break with his father's traditions of avoiding relationships in marrying Kafar bounty hunter Sintas Fel. The two had a daughter named Aelin, and the three settled down on Concord Dawn for a time where Fett worked as a journeyman protector. But Fett's trauma left him badly unprepared for family life, and he struggled hard to adapt. In his own words, "I was 16 and Sintas was 18. The only females I knew as a kid were Kaminoan and a changeling bounty hunter. Doesn't equip you to be a family man. I tried." Fett and Vel started to experience strains in their relationship after Fett got kicked out of the Protectors and exiled from Concord Dawn. Fett ended up going out for milk and ditching his wife and kid, the latter of whom wouldn't see him for nearly 2 decades, and setting off to become a full-time bounty hunter once more. This time around, he took his father's warning to avoid personal attachments very seriously. His antisocial tendencies had been worsened by his failed marriage. By the time of the Battle of Endor, Fett had developed a very boomerish set of moral guidelines for himself to follow, as he briefly explained to Leia during her time as a slave in Jabba's palace. To again quote the king himself, "Sex between those not married is immoral." In addition to his views on those matters, Fett also avoided alcohol and all other intoxicating substances when he could, choosing to live a very puritanical life. Of course, this being mostly legends, there's no knowing how much of it the Mandalorian will stick to. But considering that they just brought Jango Fett's origins in the Mandalorian Civil War back to canon seemingly just for the sake of it, we'd bet money that Boba will stick to most of these codes except maybe the no booze one. But if that's the case, then there's a possibility that Boba may not have been as charitable to Din as it seems. Jango Fett's bounty hunter code included advice on matters of honor and morality, but it also included practical advice, and as the hunt for Grogu kicks off, Din would do best to recall one particular precept of the Fett family code: never tell the truth in a trade. So, that's our look at the untold honorable side of Boba Fett, a simple man trying to make his way in the galaxy. But what do you think? Did you enjoy this latest episode? I really reckon it's one of the better ones and was filled with a lot of fun action, and Boba Fett's just a badass, so yeah, I loved it. Let me know what you guys think. And just before you go guys, if you want to join our wider community, check us out on Patreon, our Relax Shack music channel, where you can use the music we use in this video and plenty of our other previous ones on your own videos, and our Geetsly's Discord and Geetsly's Gaming Network. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.